Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Charts with Dan. It was a magician's weekend at the box office with Now You See Me, Now You Don't appearing at number 1 and The Running Man largely disappearing at number 2. So let's get into the top 10 at this past weekend's box office. These are the actual numbers since we're back on Tuesday this week. And the number 1 movie, as I mentioned, is Now You See Me, Now You Don't, which opened with just over $21 million. In second place, and this was a substantial downgrade from its initial estimate, was The Running Man at $16.49 million. The estimate came in at $17 million, which was already low, and we'll look at those numbers in a few minutes. Predator: Badlands did not have a great hold in its second weekend with all the competition. It dropped 68.2% in weekend number 2, yikes, and brought in $12.7 million. You definitely want to see a better hold for a movie like that, especially one that was pretty well received. Its domestic total now is at just over $66 million. Regretting You continues to hold well at number 4, dropping 44.1% and bringing in another $3.7 million. Black Phone 2 is still hanging around the top 5 in its fifth weekend. It dropped 49% and brought in another $2.6 million. At number 6 was the latest film from Osgood Perkins. It did not hit the highs of some of his other movies like Long Legs and The Monkey. Keeper opened at $2.5 million. In seventh place was Nuremberg, which dropped 37.2% in weekend number 2 and brought in another $2.4 million. Sarah's Oil, with its A+ cinema score, dropped less than 50% in weekend number 2. It dropped 47.4% to bring in $2.2 million. Begonia is still hanging around the top 10. It brought in $1.6 million. And Chainsaw Man, the movie, Reze Arc, rounds out the top 10, dropping 54.8% in its fourth weekend of release with a $1.5 million total. So let's talk about some of these movies in the top 10, and we will start with Now You See Me. This has been kind of a long-ranging franchise over a decade now, and this is how Now You See Me, Now You Don't, which is the third movie in the franchise, although the second one should have been called Now You Don't. It's a little bit too late for that. But this is how it compares to the opening of the other two films. The first Now You See Me movie opened to $29.3 million. Now You See Me 2 opened to $22.3, and Now You See Me, Now You Don't opened to just over $21 million. So they look somewhat analogous when you look at that. They're all in the 20s. Of course, when you adjust for inflation, which again is a measure of how much these movies did make when they were released, not how much they would make if they were released today, you can see there's a bit more of a difference. The first Now You See Me opened to $42.2 million adjusted for inflation. Now You See Me 2 opened to $29.8 million. And Now You See Me, Now You Don't opens to $21 million. So about half of what we saw with the opening weekend for the first Now You See Me film. Still, it was made on a pretty smart budget, and as we'll see, it did well internationally, so no real complaints there. Let's talk about The Running Man, which did have a disappointing opening weekend, but it was, if you're looking for a silver lining, one of the best openings for a Stephen King adaptation. These are the top 10 openings for Stephen King adaptations, and as you can see, they don't generally tend to have big blockbuster opening weekends. The first two It movies, It and It Chapter 2, are really the only ones that had breakout openings at $123.4 and $91 million respectively. Then we have 2019's Pet Sematary. I'd forgotten about that movie too, and I saw it in theaters, which opened to $24.5 million. 1408 comes in fourth at $20.6 million. Then we have The Dark Tower at $19.1 million. Secret Window comes in sixth place, followed by The Green Mile with $18 million. The Running Man is the eighth highest grossing Stephen King adaptation at $16.4 million. Then we have 2013's Carrie and Dreamcatcher rounding out the top 10. But there have been Stephen King movies coming out for a lot of years, and you know what I like to do on the show? Adjust for inflation. So let's see what the top earning Stephen King adaptations were on opening weekend when you do adjust for inflation. Of course, It and It Chapter 2 are still easily numbers 1 and 2, but The Green Mile moves up to third place at $39.1 million, with 1408 at number 4 and Secret Window at number 5 with $32 million. Then we have the original Pet Sematary from 1989 in sixth place at $31.4 million. The remake comes in right behind it from 2019 at $30.7 million. Dreamcatcher is at number 8 at $27.2 million. Then we have the opening of Misery at $24.9 million, and The Dark Tower rounding out the top 10 at $24.94 million. So basically almost tied with Misery. And on last week's show, I asked the members here on the channel what Stephen King adaptation was their favorite. And I guess it's not a huge shock that The Shawshank Redemption won this handily with 51 total votes. I thought it might be a little bit closer. I know Shawshank is like number one on IMDb, but I thought maybe the love would get spread. But no, it was easily Shawshank Redemption. The Shining comes in second place with 20 votes. Then we have The Green Mile with 17 votes. The First It at number 4 with 16 votes. And then the biggest surprise to me, but a pleasant surprise because I like this movie a lot, was Dr. Sleep, which rounds out the top 5 with 15 total votes. So judging it as a Stephen King adaptation, The Running Man didn't do too badly, but it did not do well when you compare it to its budget and also maybe the expectations for director Edgar Wright. These are Edgar Wright's top opening weekends, and The Running Man was his second best opening at $16.49 million. That comes in only behind Baby Driver, which opened to $20.5 million on its first Friday through Sunday weekend, although the movie actually opened on a Wednesday, so there were 2 days of grosses that did not count toward that opening weekend. Scott Pilgrim vs. the World comes in third place, followed by The World's End, Hot Fuzz, Last Night in Soho, and then Shaun of the Dead, which made $3.3 million in limited release. It was in about 700 theaters, I think, in its opening weekend. So it did not have the full wide release that these other films had. This also does not include The Sparks Brothers, which was a documentary that was directed by Edgar Wright. And the biggest thing with The Running Man was its earning compared to its budget. It was budgeted reportedly at around $110 million, which for a remake of a Stephen King novel is pretty hefty. As you can see, they don't necessarily open huge at the box office. Maybe there was the hope that it would draft off of the Arnold Schwarzenegger film, but that didn't exactly happen. And even with Edgar Wright, I think that giving him a budget of this size was disproportional to his box office draw. This is a chart that shows you the budget for Edgar Wright films versus their total domestic gross, and it follows a familiar pattern until we get to The Running Man. So Shaun of the Dead made more than its budget, Hot Fuzz made more than its budget. Then you can see with Edgar Wright's third film, Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, we have a big spike in budget, but the domestic gross lagged behind. So for Edgar Wright's next film, he was returning to finish out the Cornetto trilogy. The budget went down. The movie made more than its budget, not necessarily turning a profit, but the gross at least was higher than the budget. Then with Baby Driver, he gets a bit of an increase in budget, and the movie does very well. It easily made more than its budget. So with Last Night in Soho, we see an increase in the budget once again, but Last Night in Soho was not a financial success. And what you would usually see on a chart like this is a studio saying, well, given that, we're going to budget wisely on your next film. But instead, Edgar Wright got his biggest budget ever with The Running Man, and the opening did not measure up. It's going to be a tough road to profitability for this film, and having seen the movie, I don't think it needed to be budgeted as high as it was. I think you could have made some cuts to the film, made it a bit leaner, maybe budgeted it at, let's say, $80 million versus $110 million. That doesn't necessarily mean it'd be a huge success, but it would have been much easier to find its way to profitability. But Paramount decided, hey, you know what? Let's just throw caution to the wind. We'll give this a $100+ million budget. There have been plenty of think pieces trying to analyze what happened with the movie. Part of it is that it got caught up in the transition to the new ownership at Paramount, and perhaps they didn't know how to market the movie. But I think that this was also a movie that never really had the appeal to justify the budget that it was given. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with Edgar Wright's next project and what kind of budget he can command for that project. Predator is also still kicking around the top 5, and you can see that as of right now, it is the second highest grossing Predator film of all time domestically at $66 million, behind Alien vs. Predator at $80.2 million. And even with that big weekend number 2 drop-off, I think that it's a pretty good bet that it's going to be number 1 on this list and be able to say it's the highest grossing Predator movie of all time. However, when you adjust for inflation, Predator Badlands is currently at number 6, just ahead of The Predator and really right behind Aliens vs. Predator Requiem. I think it'll probably get as high as number 3. Predators is right there at $77.9 million, but that's where it's going to stay. I don't see it making either $140 or $170 million. So I think Badlands, when you adjust for inflation, is going to stick there at number 3, which isn't terrible. It's not a breakout hit, but it's certainly doing more to justify its budget than we're seeing with The Running Man. And I think the two movies are actually budgeted fairly close together. Dropping out of the top 10 this past weekend, we had 3 movies. Tron Ares, another movie that definitely did not justify its budget, is out after 5 weeks. Springsteen, Deliver Me From Nowhere, is out after 3 weeks. And Die, My Love is out after just 1 week. Not a huge shocker there. Last week, I talked about the Sydney Sweeney movie, Christy, which did not debut in the top 10. And we looked at the chart. It was actually one of the worst openings ever for a movie opening on 1,000 screens or more. Well, according to the statistics that I could find, in its second weekend, Christy had the worst second weekend by percentage of any movie according to all records that are kept. This is based off of Box Office Mojo records, and one of the only things that they keep updated are the weekend-to-weekend drop records. And according to their numbers, Christy dropped 91.7% from weekend number 1 to weekend number 2. That is top all-time, or bottom, I guess, for any movie in 1,000 theaters or more. Christy there at 91.7%. This excludes re-releases and special events. Collide comes in at second place. National Champions is in third. I believe that is a post-pandemic movie. Undiscovered is in fourth place. Boy Kills World, which didn't come out too terribly long ago, within the last year and a half or so, is in fifth. That dropped 85.1%. Slow Burn is in sixth place. Pets on a Train, which is a release from this year, I think only 2 or 3 weeks ago, is in seventh at 84.6%. One Piece film Red, which kind of skirts the line of being a special event, comes in at number 8. Jane Got a Gun comes in at number 9. It dropped 83.5%. And Dangerous Animals, which also came out this year, dropped 82.6%. So a lot of post-COVID releases here because of the change in theatrical behavior from audiences. But Christy, as of right now, putting up the biggest drop ever for a movie, at least in modern record keeping, from weekend 1 to weekend 2. And a big reason why is that when we look at the biggest theater count changes from this past weekend, Christy lost 1,367 theaters in weekend number 2. This is uncommon, but not unheard of. The thing with Christy is that it had a small distributor. So that distributor did not have the same kind of leverage over theater chains that the studios do and the larger distributors do. So they could not go to AMC or Regal or Cinemark and say, hey, we need you to guarantee us a 2-week theatrical run. That's usually what you see. Movies are locked into their theater count for 2 weeks. Christy was not able to get that, and so in its second weekend, it lost the vast majority of its theaters. That contributed to its very bad weekend number 2. Back to the Future's 40th anniversary re-release lost 1,081 theaters. It was still only in about 275. Stitch had also lost over 1,000 theaters, 1,070 of them. Springsteen, Deliver Me From Nowhere, shed exactly half of its theaters, 1,015 of them. And Chainsaw Man, the movie Reze Arc, lost a big chunk of theaters, 865, but it's still in 1,420. Well, this is the pretty depressing road to recovery. The red line is the box office weekend average for 2021 to 2024. The blue line is the average from 2015 to 2019 pre-pandemic. And the dotted black line is the box office for every weekend this year. And you can see that we are now 6 or 7 weeks into a streak of not only being below the pre-pandemic average, but being below the post-pandemic average. Of course, we are looking for a huge boost this upcoming weekend with Wicked for Good hitting theaters. That should take us above that red line. But I mean, this is just a very stark illustration of the lack of recovery that we have seen at the box office, particularly in October and November. And The Running Man is unfortunately one of the movies that has contributed to that cold streak, but it was also a leading man vehicle for Glenn Powell, and that takes us to this week's Charts with Dan trivia question. Glenn Powell has appeared in 6 films that opened at number 1 in their first weekend of wide release. So a movie could have opened in limited release first. This is their first weekend of wide release. Can you name those 6 movies? My guess is about half of them are going to be easy and the other half might be a little bit difficult. So I'll give you a second to think about it. If you need more time, pause the video now. The 6 movies are Spy Kids 3D Game Over, which I believe was his first movie. He had a small role in that one. The Dark Knight Rises, if you'll remember, he was on the trading room floor in the Gotham Stock Exchange. Ride Along 2, I think he had a small part at the beginning of that movie. Hidden Figures, he had a small part in that film. And then, of course, the 2 that I think most people guessed, Top Gun Maverick and Twisters. Unfortunately, The Running Man could not be added to that list. We've got so much more to cover on this week's show, but before we do, I want to thank HelloFresh for sponsoring this episode. It's almost Thanksgiving, which for a lot of people means cooking a big meal for the whole family. But while Thanksgiving dinner may take a whole day to prepare, HelloFresh is here to take care of the rest, delivering chef-crafted recipes and fresh ingredients right to your door. HelloFresh is the #1 meal kit in America, and they've just doubled the menu, bringing you 100 options each week, including seasonal dishes and recipes from around the world. Their Thanksgiving week menu even includes dishes like stuffing, mashed potatoes and gravy, and an apple crisp for dessert. I am neither a very good nor a very experienced cook, but I've made meals from HelloFresh at home, and it's easy because they send you a very detailed recipe. All you have to do is follow the instructions. You have all of the ingredients right there. You don't have to go out to the market and fight the crowds, all of that stuff. If you can read directions, you can cook at home with HelloFresh. And with all the options available, you can make any menu you want, whether you're looking to eat healthier, heartier, or a bit of both. The best way to cook just got better. Go to HelloFresh.com/DanMurrell10FM right now to get 10 free meals plus a free breakfast for life, 1 per box with active subscription. Free meals applied as a discount on the first box. New subscribers only. Varies by plan. That's HelloFresh.com/DanMurrell10FM to get 10 free meals plus free breakfast for life. Let's take a look at the top per theater averages for this past weekend. And at #1 was Arco, which is an animated film from France. It's being distributed here in the United States by Neon with an English language voice cast. It played in 2 theaters and brought in $19,143 per theater. I've had a chance to see Arco. I have to say I really enjoyed it. It's about as close as you can get to Studio Ghibli without it actually being Studio Ghibli. In second place is Surat, which comes in at $17,029 per theater in 2 theaters. This is Spain's entry in the Best International Feature category at the Academy Awards that will be handed out next year, and was also a prize winner at the Cannes Film Festival. In third place is Rebuilding, which is a small film that saw its debut back at Sundance in January. It's about a father recovering from a wildfire, and it stars Josh O'Connor. In fourth place is Sentimental Value, which expanded to 28 theaters and brought in $13,580 per theater. You can find my review of that movie right here on the channel. And then rounding out the top 5 is Now You See Me, Now You Don't, which brought in just over $6,100 per theater in each of its 3,400 plus theaters. These were the top films in limited release this past weekend. At #1 was DDPRD2, and I'm probably butchering that, in an unknown number of theaters. It brought in about $660,000. That's a Hindi language rom-com. In second place was Sentimental Value, which brought in $380,000 total across its 28 theaters. In third place is Kanta in an unknown number of theaters, which brought in $172,000. This is a Tamil language mystery film set in the 1950s. In fourth place was It Was Just an Accident in 110 theaters. Unfortunately, the theater count is shrinking, so it doesn't look like it's going to expand further right now, although if it does well when Academy Award nominations are announced, I could see it re-expanding in early 2026. It brought in $137,000. And at number 5 is Blue Moon, playing in 81 theaters, which brought in just under $100,000. I've also had a chance to see this one. I'm watching as many awards movies as I can, and I have to say that Ethan Hawke is absolutely phenomenal in Blue Moon. This is the 2025 Fall Holiday Box Office chart. At #1 is The Conjuring Last Rites, and at #2 is Demon Slayer Infinity Castle. If Wicked for Good does as expected, then it should absolutely be on this chart this time next week, and we'll see just how high up the chart it goes. Black Phone 2 moves up to #3 with $74.6 million. That puts it ahead of Tron Ares at $72.7 million. One Battle After Another stays at #5. Predator Badlands is on the move. It's up to #6 at $66 million. Downton Abbey, the grand finale, moves down 1 spot to #7. Regretting You is just behind Downton Abbey by about $300,000, so it'll be moving up next week. Chainsaw Man, the movie's at #9. And The Long Walk is at #10, most likely for one more week until Wicked knocks it off. All right, let's take a look now at the international box office. This is all markets outside of the US and Canada, and there are some familiar movies, or at least one, that we haven't seen on this chart in a while. At number one is Now You See Me, Now You Don't, which had a good international opening to match its domestic opening. China was a big driver of the box office, over $20 million there. Strangely, China, a big fan apparently of this franchise, certainly more than other Hollywood films, but they were an even bigger fan of Demon Slayer Infinity Castle, which did finally get that Chinese release and brought in $53.6 million. So that is a huge boost to its worldwide gross, which we'll look at in just a few minutes. Predator Badlands dropped 59.7% to bring in $16.1 million. The Running Man didn't really catch on in any of the other countries that it opened in. It only brought in $11.2 million. And Chainsaw Man, the movie Reze Arc, rounds out the top five at $5.32 million. So two anime films in the top five. When you take those international numbers, you combine them with our domestic numbers, we get the top five films worldwide. And at number one was Now You See Me, Now You Don't, which opens to $75.2 million. I believe the budget for that film was under $100 million, so that's a good start for that movie. Demon Slayer Infinity Castle is at $53.8 million. That brings its worldwide gross up to $729.9 million. Predator Badlands brought in $28.8 million worldwide. Its worldwide gross now at $136.2 million. The Running Man opening to $27.6 million worldwide. And Regretting You rounds out the top five at $6.8 million. Its worldwide gross now at $82.1 million. And when we look at the Predator franchise by worldwide gross, Predator Badlands is now at number one and less than $40 million away from taking the top spot from Alien vs. Predator, so we will track that in the weeks to come. It's now ahead of Aliens vs. Predator, Predators, Predator, and Predator 2. Very odd naming convention for this franchise. This is the 2025 worldwide box office, and nothing's really changed position. There actually hasn't been a new movie added to this list since Fantastic Four, I think. It's been a while. Demon Slayer Infinity Castle is still at number five, but you can see it is gaining somewhat on Jurassic World Rebirth. I don't know if it's got $140 million more left in it, but it is going to solidify that number five spot. Of course, Naja 2 and Lilo and Stitch, the only $2 billion movies released so far this year, although there are several hopefuls coming out in the next handful of weeks. And one of those movies is Wicked for Good. That brings us to our Charts with Dan member poll question for this week. Do you think that Wicked for Good will beat a Minecraft movie to be the biggest opening domestically of 2025? A Minecraft movie opened to $162.7 million. So basically, the question is, do you think it's going to make more than that? You can vote right now in the member poll on YouTube. The results will be revealed on next week's show. If you're not a member, depending on how you're watching this, there might be a button that says become a member, or there's definitely a link down in the description below. You get to vote in these polls. You get some of my videos early. You get custom badges and emoji to use in the chat, and you get to join a bunch of other members. So I'd love to have you join, hear your voice every week here on the show, and hopefully there's something in it for you too. So that's everything that's going on at the box office. Briefly, let's look at the latest numbers we have in the world of streaming, and we'll start with the latest from Netflix. New ones will be out later today, but this covers November 3rd through the 9th. And at number one was the debut of Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein. It came in at 20.83 million views. In second place, you may as well just cement this in here for now, K-Pop Demon Hunters at 12.42 million views. A House of Dynamite moves down to third place at just over 10 million views. Then we have The Witcher Season 4 at 7.43 million views in its second week on the chart. Rulers of Fortune rounds out the top five. At number six, we have the Netflix original movie Mango at 5.75 million views. That is a Danish romance film, not an SNL adaptation of the Chris Kattan sketch character. Eileen, Queen of the Serial Killers, is at number 7. The Asset Season 1 is at number 8. At number 9, we have another Shrek movie. A lot of them have been kind of rotating in and out. Shrek Forever After comes in at 5.18 million views. And Jack Reacher, Never Go Back, comes in 10th place at 5.14 million views. Let's take a look now at the latest from Nielsen. Now, these are domestic numbers only, not global numbers like the Netflix ones we just saw, and they're delayed by about a month because that's how long it takes Nielsen to release them. So these are the top Nielsen streaming movies for October 13th through the 19th. At number 1 was the debut of The Perfect Neighbor on Netflix at 13.3 million hours watched. K-Pop Demon Hunters is at number 2 on this chart as well at 12.48 million hours watched. The Woman in Cabin 10 slips to number 3. 2025's How to Train Your Dragon is at number 4. Vacation, which I believe is the Ed Helms remake or reboot or whatever you want of the Vacation franchise, comes in 5th place. The A-Team comes in 6th place. Maze Runner The Death Cure comes in 7th place, and Maze Runner The Scorch Trials, which is a holdover from last week, comes in 8th. So a lot of people marathoning, no pun intended, the Maze Runner films over the last couple weeks, at least back in October when these numbers were taken. The documentary John Candy, I Like Me on Amazon Prime Video comes in at number 9 with 3.48 million hours watched, and Play Dirty rounds out the top 10 with 3.45 million hours watched. These were the most watched streaming shows on October 13th to the 19th. At number 1 was Monster, the Ed Gein story, which takes a big jump down from last week, but still able to hold on to number 1. At number 2 is a series on Netflix called Poldark. It is not a Netflix original series. It's actually a BBC drama that ran from 2015 to 2019, but has apparently seen a huge surge of popularity here in the United States. 15.9 million hours watched there. Love is Blind comes in 3rd place. The Diplomat returns with a new season in 4th place. NCIS is in 5th place. Grey's Anatomy is in 6th place. Boots, which got the attention of the Pentagon, and not necessarily in a great way, comes in at number 7 with 13.3 million hours watched. Then we have Bob's Burgers at number 8, Bluey at number 9, and SpongeBob SquarePants rounding out the top 10. This is what the top streaming shows look like when you measure it by hours watched per episode. So you take the total number of hours watched, divide it by the number of episodes you can watch, and that's how you get this number. Monster, the Ed Gein story is at the top with 2.04 million hours watched per episode, followed by Boots at 1.66 million hours per episode. Miss Rachel comes in 3rd place at 743,000 hours per episode. Then we have The Diplomat in 4th. Wednesday in the top 5 at just over 400,000 hours per episode. Poldark is at number 6 at 369,000 hours per episode, followed by Tulsa King at number 7. Stranger Things is on the chart. I guess people already back in October starting to rewatch in preparation for the final season. Only Murders in the Building, as it approached the end of its most recent season, comes in at number 9. And Love is Blind rounds out the top 10. And those are all the numbers I have for you this week. Before we go, though, I wanted to give you a heads up on some things you might be interested in watching, both in theaters and at home for this upcoming week. First of all, today available for premium video on demand and digital sale is the film Violent Ends. If you didn't see it, I did a great interview with the director of this movie, John Michael Powell, who grew up in the same hometown as me. We're basically the same age. It was a really good interview. If you didn't get a chance to see that movie in theaters and you wanted to, you can watch it at home starting today. Tomorrow on broadcast television, we don't talk about that very much here, on NBC, they will be broadcasting Wicked. I guess it's pretty good when a major network is owned by the same company that owns the movie studio releasing the sequel, so you can watch Wicked on NBC tomorrow night. On Thursday, A Man on the Inside Season 2 debuts on Netflix, starring Ted Danson. On Peacock, you can catch High Horse, the Black Cowboy, which is a 3-episode docuseries about black cowboys in the American Old West. It is executive produced by Jordan Peele's Monkey Paw. On Netflix this Thursday is the final season of Jurassic World Chaos Theory. I've heard these animated shows are actually the best thing in the Jurassic World universe. On Amazon Prime Video, you can catch After the Hunt, which debuts on streaming this Thursday. And on Hulu, you can catch The Roses. Then the big release this upcoming weekend in theaters around the country is Wicked for Good. I'm actually on the road today as we speak to catch a screening of the film, so you can look for my review right here on the channel tomorrow. Also hitting theaters is Sisu, Road to Revenge. I've heard good things about the first Sisu movie. I haven't seen it. I've read good reviews about this movie as well. I guess it's pretty good counter-programming to Wicked. And also in theaters around the country this weekend is a movie called Rental Family, which stars Brendan Fraser as an American living in Japan who starts working for a company that provides actors to play the roles of family members or people who just need something done in their lives, basically to stand in for people. It sounds kind of like the Nathan Fielder show, The Rehearsal. I've had a chance to see this movie, and I think that Brendan Fraser particularly is very, very good in it. Debuting on Netflix this Friday is Train Dreams, starring Joel Edgerton. Look out for this one. It looks like it might be a Dark Horse Awards contender, and I've heard some good things about it ever since it premiered back in January at Sundance. On Peacock this Friday, you can catch The Bad Guys 2, and on HBO Max, you can catch The Conjuring: Last Rites. So if you still have an itch that wasn't scratched by Halloween, there's a new scary movie that you can watch at home. And then next Monday is the debut of the final season of Bel-Air on Peacock. It's the 4th season. You can catch the first 3 episodes, and the rest will follow. And that's everything I've got for you this week. Thank you so much for watching. Thanks to HelloFresh for sponsoring this episode. And stay tuned because, as I mentioned, I've got my review of Wicked for Good, which will be right here on the channel tomorrow. I will also pretty soon, either late this week or early next week, have a review of Wake Up Dead Man, which is the new Knives Out movie. And I am watching as many awards movies as I possibly can. I also am keeping tabs on the bids that are coming in for Warner Brothers this week. And I may do a news update to that to see who's throwing their hat in the ring and what are they offering. So it is a very busy time as we get toward the end of the year, and I appreciate you spending part of that time here with me. If you haven't subscribed, be sure to subscribe. Hit that notification bell so you know when I upload a new video. And until next time, stay safe, and I'll see you then. Bye.